Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this second webinar in our series of 3 webinars. Today's topic is achieving business adaptability without a core overhaul. My name is Steve Monahan, and I am a co-founder and partner of Alacrity Partners. And I've spent the last 30 years helping organizations navigate technology-driven transformation. And for about 20 of those years, I was with Gartner, where I helped financial institutions of various sizes with their transformation strategy and execution, as well as assessing and analyzing their technology economics to optimize cost and fund investment. My partners at Alacrity and I started Alacrity ultimately with the purpose of helping mid-market banks and credit unions punch above their weight with technology. And while you may not have the resources of the big banks, we believe you have something far more important, and that's the role you play in communities and the purpose you serve for those communities. So we like to help mid-market banks and credit unions with technology, but never at the expense of humanity. I'm excited to be joined by Isabel Rios this morning. Isabel, care to introduce yourself?
Of course. Thank you, Steve, and happy to be here with everyone as well. My name is Isabel Rios, and I am the banking operations person here at Solutions Metrix, and my experience is 11 years with my previous credit union, where I started on the front lines and worked my way through pretty much every position in our credit union, to include operations, member experience, and contact center. And so I have traded the credit union hat and been able to jump to this side to be able to lend experience, expertise in the digital transformation of a lot of different organizations. So I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. Happy you're here, Isabel. Our objective for this session is to offer you an alternative technology paradigm to become what we call an adaptable business. And we'll cover 3 topics this morning. First, we'll start with adapt or fall behind. We'll talk about what business adaptability is and why it's important. Then we'll talk about the relationship between technology sophistication and your ability to have business adaptability. And we'll close out the session with a paradigm shift in terms of how we think about technology, and perhaps a new way for you to think about technology as you start your transformation to an adaptable business. So let's jump in. Adapt or fall behind. I think all of us would agree that it's not business as usual for banks or credit unions. We are in a period of uncertainty where perhaps the only certainty is uncertainty. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that we face an unprecedented set of challenges converging on us at the same time. We certainly have macroeconomic uncertainty. There was a rate cut yesterday. There's worries now about employment, more so than inflation. At least that's the Fed's thinking. Our industry continues to consolidate. PNC announced a big acquisition last week. I think I saw a number of around 100 or so announced mergers this year. And for many of you, you may be asking yourself, are we going to be a buyer or a seller in a transaction? Certainly more new and disruptive technology continues to reshape our industry, the way we operate, the way we interact with our employees and our customers or members. Artificial intelligence being top of the headlines today. And with the new administration, there have been some regulatory and compliance shifts, some perhaps for the better, some we'll have to wait and see. Isabel, what would you say? Are there any other challenges you're seeing as you work with clients in the banking and credit union space?
Well, I think too that you mentioned for sure, in today's administration, things change really rapidly. So it's always, can we keep up with the different announcements in compliance and regulatory shifts? And then for sure, AI continues to be a hot topic. We see different questions or requests for guidance on exactly how to lean in to AI because it's so new to our industry as far as how do we want to incorporate that. So those two continue to just be those pressing topics that we keep hearing about.
Yeah, and I think with artificial intelligence, a lot of the conversations we're having with our mid-market bank and credit union clients are first of all just understanding their readiness for AI, whether it's data quality, governance. Many of you are probably looking to some of your vendors to help jumpstart your AI journey. Some of you may be actually looking at introducing your own models for business process and value streams. And I think the other, just a couple more, we see a lot around are just this idea of open banking. And while 1033, Regulation 1033 is on hold for now, that's still a conversation that people are having to be ready for it. Europe has had open banking requirements for a long time, and certainly real-time payments, stable coin. And I think ultimately just the demographic shifts as banks and credit unions try to attract younger customers. So there's a lot of different things going on. And so the question is, in a period of uncertainty, how do we survive? And we believe it's this idea of adaptability or business adaptability. And we like to quote Charles Darwin because it was pretty prescient comment he made 100 years ago. And it's not the most the strongest or the smartest that survive. It's the ones that are most adaptable to change. And that's really important to consider given the challenge of how do we prepare for such an uncertain future. And to start to think about that challenge, it's a good idea to look at our current state and where we are across a few dimensions. If we think about the pace of change, with some exception, the financial crisis and some of the technology disruptions over the past 25 years, for the most part, we didn't have to have a rapid pace of change. We could test and learn and watch others and be more methodical and periodic as we introduced new capabilities, whether they be business capabilities or technical capabilities. And our business design really was and has been designed for that pace of change. If you look at a bank or credit union, they're all pretty much organized the same way. They have the same lines of business, they have the same span of control, fairly rigid because the pace of change has not been overly dynamic. And from a technology perspective, because of the pace of change and the known knowns, what the vendors offered in the marketplace and what we've bought and added to over the years are point solutions that are specific to known business requirements. We've done RFPs and so forth and selected vendors based on a set of known business and technical requirements. Well, if we think about an uncertain future, it's our point of view that really to survive, ultimately, we need to transform into an adaptable business. And if we compare where we are now and what a transformed state looks like to the current state, the pace of change is rapid and constant. We're seeing that. It's just speeding up. We need a business design that's more adaptable and dynamic so that we can respond to opportunities and challenges. And because we are operating in an uncertain environment, we need to rethink our technology construct, one from point solutions for very specific and known business requirements to digital technology platforms that can be enhanced over time as new opportunities or challenges present themselves. And ultimately, the transformation outcome is adaptable business. And simply put, an adaptable business is one that can respond to changes, to opportunities and challenges quickly. And to put a little more context on this idea of adaptable business, there's a great example from our not too distant past and COVID and the Paycheck Protection Program, where in March of 2020, none of us had any idea that PPP was coming. But a few short weeks later, we knew it was there. We had to scramble. We had to launch this new PPP program so that we could ultimately help the businesses in our communities. And Isabel, I know you went through that. How adaptable did you feel as you were going through standing up PPP at your institution?
And what an appropriate and perfect example to bring to light and aligned with this topic. When COVID hit at the organization that I was at, we were used to doing a lot of manual processes. And to your point, you know, the surge of need and applications that came in, we were not able to keep up with. And in hindsight, really looking at our technology and what we could do when you needed to have this sort of slice and dice approach versus, you know, one at a time, there was a clear, easy way to point to us falling short and not having the technology capability of doing something that was automated where we could do multiple at a time versus passing it through one pair of hands at a time. Because at that time, I mean, everyone needs help. So we unfortunately had to, you know, put them in touch with other people who were better equipped, some of the bigger players that could help them faster. And so, so a learning experience for sure, and a pretty good example of how we weren't ready.
Yeah, it was interesting times, wasn't it? But that's the new normal, right? We're going to see more and more of that. We already are in terms of being able to respond quickly. And so as we think about this idea of greater business adaptability, how do we get there? And one of the things that we have found as we've worked with clients to transform to a more adaptable business is the determinant of adaptability ultimately is your level of technology sophistication. And technology sophistication, given the world we're in and the digitized and automated world we're in, technology sophistication determines a bank or credit union's ability and timing to adopt new capabilities, be it a technology capability like artificial intelligence or a business capability. Remember when we were all trying to stand up remote deposit capture? And so if we've got this idea of business adaptability that is driven by technology sophistication, how do we start to think about our technology sophistication so we can transform? And we'll get into a framework that we use to help clients figure out where they're starting from a technology sophistication perspective that ultimately feeds the roadmap that they need to travel to become a more adaptable business. So let me walk through the model quickly here. Level one are the laggards. And legacy laggards are well behind the adoption of new capabilities, technology or business capabilities. They are usually the last to be able to do those capabilities, and a lot of it is because they have outdated technologies or have accumulated such a high degree of technical debt that it's just really, it's moving heaven and earth to introduce new capabilities. We see a lot of mid-market banks, especially on the banking side, where technology has been underinvested in for years. So they're already starting from behind the 8 ball, and that leads to the laggard sophistication level. The mainstream adopters are able to introduce capabilities, but they mirror the industry as a whole. Think of kind of keeping up as best you can, parity, treading water to a degree. Fast followers, on the other hand, are able to adopt proven capabilities, proven by the market leaders in a few areas in a timely manner before the rest of the mainstream, for what I'll call a temporary source of differentiation. And finally, market leaders have a high degree of technology sophistication across multiple domains that enable them to explore and adopt new capabilities quickly, and ultimately define what those new capabilities are in that new source and area of differentiation. I've talked a lot about the technology, but there's other elements. Isabel, what other factors have you seen that impact an institution's technology sophistication?
Well, some that I can clearly point to are the resources, and I think you mentioned that, without the resources, there's not an ability to invest in that technology. So you're going to make do with what you have and try to, do the whole duct tape approach and tape it up. So resource allocation, and of course your risk appetite. How big is your risk appetite for being one of those market leaders? And when you don't know what you don't know, sometimes you don't want to be the first to dip your toe into that pool. So we hear a lot of questions regarding, we don't want to be the first, we don't want to be the last, but resources and risk appetite for sure factor into where an institution might land on these charts.
Yeah, it's so true. There's always the human element, right? I think an important point too to underscore all of this, and it goes back to how we started the conversation. Period of uncertainty, lots of change coming, technology change coming rapidly, upending ways of working, and so forth. We're on a treadmill. And so what's market leading today will be mainstream tomorrow, will be a laggard next week, right? And so we're not in that static, periodic pace of change anymore. And I read an interesting interview earlier this week. It was the chief information officer of Ally Bank. And they've been known to be pretty progressive and out in front on their use of technology. And he was saying one of the things that keeps him up at night as a technology leader at Ally is just keeping up with the pace of change. So it's not going to get easier, it's going to get harder, and it's certainly we are on that treadmill. So where do we see the typical mid-market bank or credit union today? And what we've seen is there's still a large portion of banks and credit unions that are straddling laggard and mainstream status. And what does that ultimately mean, and what does it look like? First of all, they're lagging in capabilities that the market has adopted in many areas, whether it can be things like marketing or account opening or what have you. And while mid-market banks and credit unions have phenomenal human relationships with their customers or members, because of the reach of the big banks and their digital platforms into a neighborhood without having a branch, often these mid-market banks and credit unions are forced to differentiate on price. And ultimately, it's really hard to close capability gaps as that treadmill continues to speed up. And so the game changer really has to be technology transformation, moving to the transformed state we talked about earlier, and upping your technology sophistication to support that adaptability. Isabel, any other examples here you would share that you either disagree with me or can shed some light?
No. I agree with what you're mentioning, and so there's no surprise there. Pretty much all the financial institutions, to include the one that I came from, tend to land on between that 1 and that 2, and I would even say a little closer to the 1, and for all those reasons that you mentioned. So this information doesn't seem like it's a big shock when you've worked for one of those institutions and understand those challenges.
Yeah, Yeah. So where do we recommend mid-market banks and credit unions target in terms of sophistication? And the reality is, in the environment we're in, we have to be, as best we can, fast followers. We need to have addressed major gaps to market through technology sophistication. Again, many of you may be thinking about, and it's not uncommon when we talk to executives about their strategy, getting younger members or getting younger customers, appealing to them. And they certainly have high expectations of digital capabilities. And it's not being set by other banks per se, it's being set by other technologies or organizations outside of banking that they interact with. And so, with the ability and the strength of the human touch that mid-market banks and credit unions have, when you have a higher degree of technology sophistication, you can augment that human interaction with differentiated relationships and personalized experience through technology, and sustain a pace of adoption. And in certain cases, test and learn new market capabilities for your institution that may be out in front of everyone else. This is the competitive world we live in, and certainly being a fast follower will be important. So as we've talked about business adaptability, technology sophistication, upping our technology sophistication, what should we think about as a future state architecture or technology paradigm as we move to a more adaptable business? And to think about that, it's important to start with, well, where are we? And for most of us, we can group our technology assets and our point solutions and business applications in 4 domains. The first domain are our IT systems. Think core banking, think your transaction management, think product management. It would also be your underlying IT infrastructure and technology delivery capabilities. The second domain is our employee domain. These are the servicing tools that our employees use to do something on behalf of a customer or member or on behalf of the bank. It's also the task and workforce management technologies that employees and managers use to manage the human capital of your credit union or bank. The third domain are our customer facing technologies. Those are the various digital solutions or online banking, digital banking, account opening, et cetera, that customers use to interact directly with the bank or credit union. And finally, we have our ecosystem domain. And these are the technologies that enable us to work with the external partners and connect with the external partners that we use in the conduct of our business, whether it be the payment rails, ACH, credit rating agencies, et cetera. So if we think about these 4 technology domains, it begs the question, as we start to increase technology sophistication and become more adaptable as a business, how are these going to work together moving forward? And what we have found, and this may not be foreign to all of you on the webinar, is most of these domains right now operate in silos. And while we can connect them in various ways, we are missing something in the middle. And it's a more pervasive way to connect these domains and share information. We call that middle the integrated intelligence platform. And again, it's from an integration standpoint, it's a standardized and pervasive way to integrate the various domains within the 4 walls of our institution or with external partners, but it's also an ability to provide information and insight at the point in time of need. Isabel, what's not in the middle?
Well, my brain is hardwired to immediately want to ask, why is the core banking system or the core system not sitting in the middle? Because just from experience, of course, I'm wired to believe that that's the single source of truth, because that's where you get all your member information from. So yeah, for sure, the core banking system.
Well, hold that thought. We're gonna get into that. So, but you're right. The reality for many of us today is because we have this, we have a lot of point solutions rather than platforms. It's usually IT systems, and specifically the core, that are in the middle of everything, and the embedded processes due to those well-defined and perhaps narrow business requirements we use to select them. And for a lot of us, the technical debt and rigidity of those IT systems, not just the core, other systems of record, hinder adaptability. And from an integration perspective, for many of us, we don't have an enterprise integration capability that can provide us that integrated intelligence I talked about before. So we might have multiple integration tools. We might have a lot of point-to-point that sucks up capacity of our IT system, our IT team, because those old legacy integrations require a lot of care and feeding. Data access is often hard to get at. And we talk a lot about customer or member experience. Employee experience is just as important, right? And for many of our frontline folks, be it in the contact center, a banker out meeting with clients, or someone in the branch, they too have a fragmented experience. They might have to log into 4 or 5 different systems and look at a few different screens in order to help a customer or a member with something. And so the good news is there are techniques and technology platforms available today that fit for mid-market banks and credit unions that can start to move IT systems out of the middle and bring integrated intelligence into the middle of our ecosystem, if you will. And so, Isabel, back to your point about the core and its role today. And the core is not going away. It's obviously a very important piece of our technology, but the role of the core banking system is changing and has changed, where core systems are being moved out of the center of the technology landscape. And with these integration capabilities, we can wrap core systems or other IT systems to support standardized integration and get at data more easily. And that new center of gravity, which is created, again, is built around enterprise integration and leveraging our data across the multiple domains and areas, so that we can provide that unique, personalized member or customer experience, and just as importantly, a phenomenal employee experience. Because if our employees have a lousy experience servicing our customers, then it's not going to be so great for our customers or members either. And so I'll end with a few takeaways for you to consider. One is adaptability outpaces strategy. In today's environment, we have found that it's not the perfect strategy that wins, like PPP or other things that come up on the horizon pretty quickly. It's the ability to continuously adapt that's going to separate the leaders from the laggards. Architecture does shape advantage. Tech, and for many of you, you're probably already there, but perhaps not. Tech is no longer support infrastructure. The way we think about our future state architecture and start to move that to more platforms where we can handle unknowns better will determine how quickly we can seize or miss market opportunities. And finally, moving from a core-centric to a platform ecosystem really will shift the center of gravity, and the winners will be able to leverage their data and intelligence and integration capabilities to truly differentiate themselves from their competitors. And ultimately, in today's uncertain world, adaptability is the real strategy. Your architecture is your advantage, And the winners, we believe, will be those who trade single thread point solutions or rigid cores for living platforms. And I know we've got some time for questions. Just a quick reminder, we do have another webinar coming up on Thursday, October 17th at 11 a.m. Please join us. This will be an interesting one for those of you that are thinking about that transformation or are in the middle of a transformation. Are we headed for success or disappointment? A transformation gut check. Please join us for that one. And before I forget, I'll leave it on this screen before we get to questions. Please reach out to us. We'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions. Our emails here. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We're pretty passionate, again, about helping mid-market banks and credit unions punch above their weight. So we'd love to hear your feedback, your experiences, and would welcome the dialogue. Isabel, I think we got time for questions, correct?
We do. So holding on to this one, and looks like the question is, how would an organization get started on the transformation to an adaptable business?
Yeah, it's a great question. What we've seen is a couple of different forcing functions, if you will. One of them is given the focus on experience, especially, everyone is focused on that, but it's really important to mid-market banks and credit unions. There's often been, this frustration from the executive team of why can't we leverage our data? Why can't we provide that seamless experience? Why can't we do this thing called omni-channel? Like, we've got to do that. So oftentimes, unfortunately, there's been either an investment made or something that is not happening. So, they realize they need to take a step back and really rethink the strategy and ultimately tie it back to where the business is trying to go. But where to get started, it's important to understand, where are we trying to go? What's the postcard destination for our bank or credit union, and how do we want to differentiate ourselves and start to think about, okay, where are we from a technology sophistication standpoint? What's doable now as a quick win or a no regrets investment versus kind of that future state? And it doesn't happen overnight, right? We're gonna take bites and move towards that transform state. Oftentimes, just from a technology perspective, it starts with looking at getting better at integration. So thinking about an integration capability and some sort of CRM as we want to start to improve how we handle call volumes and case management, whether it be an issue in the contact center or sales leads or what have you. Those are typically the starting points. But we encourage you to think the long term, not just a point in time, but like what does our roadmap need to look like over time as we up our tech sophistication and move more toward platforms versus point solutions.
Great, and I'll add to that. I think a good place to maybe start is at a good tech stack analysis. I think there was a point in time at our financial institution where we were daydreaming of doing this exercise of looking through the vendor management library of contracts that we had, and because you'd be surprised with how many things you're paying for that you're either not fully leveraging, and we talked about resources and how that contributes to not being able to adopt new technologies or anything you want to go out and find the resources for. It sometimes is lost in one of those contracts that was maybe overlooked because it was signed by someone who's no longer at the institution. And so going through, do those contracts and partnerships, are those contributing to, as you mentioned, your strategic goals, your financial goals, whatever the goals are for the organization? Do those partnerships still align with that? And is there some cost savings because maybe it was overlooked and someone didn't realize you're still doing business with some of these other vendors? So a good exercise nonetheless to go through.
Yeah, and I would say if we can maybe get the attendees here the link to the first webinar, the funding webinar we started with. You're exactly right. First of all, we've got to fund all of this stuff, right? And the good news is there are platforms out there that are, again, appropriate for mid-market banks and credit unions that the economics can make sense. It's not, it's not going to, pun intended, break the bank, but it's important because we're in this treadmill, as we talked about in the first webinar. We've got to continue to optimize what we have to make room for these new investments as they become part of our way of working. And part of that is exactly right, Isabel. It's looking at our contracts, looking at where we can automate, looking at how we can reimagine the way we interact and work together as business and technology professionals with and interact with our customers and members and so forth. I think, just in the spirit of the title of this webinar, for many of you, and we're having more and more of these conversations with our clients, core banking is a big discussion. And for many of you, it might be, hey, we've got a renewal coming up, or we're looking to make a change. And the core banking space is pretty exciting right now, in the sense that the legacy players are really, they've realized they've got to invest in making their cores more componentized, more API enabled, and they're doing that. But there's some other players in the market now that are also doing exciting things. So if a forcing function, for instance, is a core renewal or core modernization or replacement, part of that conversation needs to be, okay, well, where are we going as a business? What role does our core need to play? What businesses do we need to be able to support through our core from the product perspective and so forth? And that all ties into the road to technology sophistication and ultimately business adaptability.
Right. And not to keep this particular question going and going, but a lot of those vendors that you have contracts with have now added maybe some enhancements to their services, being that everything's changing so quickly, and they know that is a necessity now. And sometimes those aren't reevaluated because no one has met with them regularly. And so there might be some opportunity in the current partnerships to say, hey, they have this new capability that will help us be more adaptable. And it's so a good exercise nonetheless. The other question that we have here, and going to the other side of things, would be, what are some of the challenges that teams would encounter or see as they go through trying to make their business more adaptable?
Yeah, and it gets back to the human element. As much as we talk about artificial intelligence and automation and so forth, we believe at Alacrity, and I know you do too, Isabel, that at the end of the day, the bank or credit union is made up of people. And with people, you have to spend the time up front to build build the organizational change management and build the support. It starts with the CEO on down, the board in many cases, like, hey, why do we need to become a more adaptable business? I think if you sat down and had conversations with pretty much everybody in your institution, they would all have an example of why we need to be more adaptable. They may not call it adaptable, but usually the conversations we have, whether it be with the executive team or the folks working in the contact center, in the branch, et cetera, there's some degree of adaptability that they're crying for, right? And so having that executive support and really taking into consideration change management from an organizational perspective along the way, from the beginning all the way through the transformation effort, is really important. Because how many of us have seen horror stories where we think we're buying this silver bullet piece of technology and we put it in and we didn't invest in the change, and it's either not used. Like CRM is a great example. One of the biggest risks of CRM is people not using it, right? And so where we've seen problems is that lack of executive commitment and focus on organizational change management, along with the technology sophistication that's happening. I'd say that's a big one. The other one is just making sure we educate the executive team and the decision makers on the technology. We're not going to turn perhaps your CEO or your COO or even your CFO into a deep technologist, but because of the world we live in now, we need to help educate them on what the opportunities are, what the risks are, and help them provide input and ultimately make better decisions as it relates to technology.
That's a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up as far as the change management, because I would agree with you wholeheartedly that that seems to be the biggest challenge within any type of technology project, or just anything that's going to change the way you do things day to day. So I guess just coming from the operational side of things and having been a manager of frontline employees, the disruption to the consistencies of, I know that, you kind of mentioned logging into 5 different systems, and where I was at, it was way more than that. You're talking about somewhere between 9 and 10. But the thing is, your brain gets trained to do it, and your routine is now you're bringing up these windows or these applications to log in every day to do your job, and the disruption that it takes, even if it is cutting some of those in half or making that a little bit more streamlined, you still get so much of the pushback from your frontline teams that are the ones that are interacting day to day with your customers and your members. So I would say that that's a big challenge that the C-suite or the executive team has to consider and has to figure out a way to work with both sides to understand the big picture, right? What is each person's role within the organization play into achieving that? And so that's important to be able to reinforce that and drill that in every day, so that your teller and your platform staff understands what their role is and what's in it for them, right? Because it's always what's in it for me. So
Yeah.
I would say I would agree with you wholeheartedly that the change management is definitely continues to be a big, huge challenge.
Well, and I would say, just maybe to put a bow on this, on the positive side, I've seen, and I'm sure you have, when you engage folks across all levels of the bank or credit union, you start to see, in maybe places you didn't expect it, champions emerge, where they're excited and, oh, it's about time, and they dive into it with you wholeheartedly, and that's exciting. And it's exciting when you start to see the collective innovation of the people that you have at your institution really rally around a transformative effort. And again, that happens when they understand what we're transforming to and why. And one of my mentors said to me earlier in my career, when I started getting involved in transformations, he said, look, it's really important to tell people what's changing and why. That's important, why we're changing. It's also important, and just as important, to tell them what's not changing. And for a lot of us, that starts with our culture, right? We've been, for many credit unions and community banks, they've been around for 40, 50, 100, 150 years, and there's a reason for that. And it's usually has something to do with their culture. So that piece of reminding folks, hey, we're not going to change this about us. We're just doing this to, help us be more adaptable. That's an important element of it as well.
What a great piece of advice. I had never heard that, and that's really, really, really good a good approach and should resonate with your staff. So with that, I don't see any more questions, and so that was a great closing thought that I think everybody can relate to, and it's almost inspirational for me personally.
Well, it's been fun, Isabel, and again, folks, thanks for joining us, and reach out to Isabel and I, email, LinkedIn. We love talking about this stuff, and we'd love to hear your stories and have a dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks.